Minsuk walks down the luxury shopping street in Gangnam, hood pulled low, hands gripping plastic bags filled with ingredients for his uncle's restaurant. The afternoon sun is brutal, but he doesn't remove the hood, can't remove it. Not here. Not where people can see. Look, it's the broken one. The voice cuts through the street noise. Minsuk's shoulders tense, but he doesn't stop walking. Doesn't look up. 3 Omegas from the Moonstone Matchmaking Agency, Seoul's most exclusive mate-finding service, stand outside a designer boutique. Their skin is flawless, their scents carefully cultivated blends of vanilla and cherry blossom. Everything about them screams desirable. Everything about them screams chosen. Even his scent is wrong, the tallest one says, wrinkling her nose. Like burnt flowers. Damaged goods. What alpha would ever choose that? Another laughs. He can't even produce proper pheromones anymore. My agency wouldn't even accept him as a client. The third one smirks. I heard his own family won't claim him at pack gatherings. Imagine being so defective even your blood rejects you. Minsuk keeps walking. Head down. Invisible. This is survival. The contrast, the arrival. Then, the roar of engines. Sudden. Commanding. 3 black armored SUVs cut through the Gangnam traffic like sharks through water, forcing expensive cars to brake and scatter. The vehicles are identical, windows tinted so dark they look like voids. No license plates. No markings. Just pure, weaponized intimidation. The convoy stops at the intersection, right where Minsuk is crossing. The street goes quiet. Even the mocking Omegas fall silent, their cruel smiles freezing. Everyone in Gangnam knows what unmarked black SUVs mean. Everyone knows what kind of power moves through Seoul in convoys. The gaze, the powerful man. The center vehicle's window lowers. Not all the way, just 3 inches. Just enough. Inside, Kang Seo-jin sits in tailored darkness. His face is sharp angles and controlled violence. Tattooed hands rest against expensive Italian fabric. His eyes, black, ancient, infinitely patient, scan the scene with the attention of an apex predator cataloging prey. He doesn't look at the 3 beautiful Omegas who have gone very still, their carefully crafted scents spiking with fear-tinged interest. He looks at the hooded figure, the one with grocery bags. The one walking with his head down, shoulders curved protectively inward, but still walking. Still moving forward despite the humiliation. Something stirs in Seo-jin's chest. Something that hasn't woken in years. The alpha inside him, the part that can't be controlled or reasoned with, lifts its head and focuses. He doesn't see scars. He doesn't see broken scent glands. He sees dignity wrapped in suffering. Strength disguised as submission. Prey worth hunting. The window rises. The convoy moves on, disappearing into Seoul's traffic like smoke. But Kang Seo-jin has made his decision. The game has begun. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and tell me where you're watching from. Minsuk's hands trembled as he scrubbed the kitchen floor, the harsh chemical smell of bleach burning his damaged scent glands. The restaurant was closed now, empty except for the ghosts that lived in every corner. This place used to smell like his mother's jollof rice and his father's kimchi stew. 2 worlds colliding in perfect harmony on every plate. Faster, Minsuk. The floor won't clean itself. His aunt's voice cut through the memory. He didn't look up. Didn't speak. Just scrubbed harder, watching his reflection warp in the wet tiles. 12 years ago, this restaurant had been called Harmony, a name his parents chose together when they opened it in Itaewon, back when Seoul was just beginning to embrace fusion cuisine. His father, Lee Jae-sung, had been a celebrated alpha chef trained in traditional Korean cooking. His mother, Adiz, had been an Omega from Lagos with a degree in culinary arts and a laugh that could fill entire rooms. They said it wouldn't work, his father used to say, pulling his mother close in the kitchen while 10-year-old Minsuk watched from the doorway. A Korean alpha and a Nigerian Omega? Opening a restaurant together? The pack elders said I was throwing away my bloodline. Your family said you were too far from home. His mother would smile, her hands dusted with flour, her scent, warm vanilla and shea butter, wrapping around them both like safety. And what did we say, Jae-sung? We said they could all go to hell, his father grinned. Because our son will grow up knowing that love doesn't need permission. Minsuk had believed them. Back then, he'd been a beautiful child. An Omega with his mother's dark skin and his father's delicate features, his scent glands already showing promise of something unique and intoxicating. The restaurant had thrived. 3 stars in the Michelin Guide. Lines around the block. His parents had been planning to expand, to open a second location. Then came the night of the fire. Minsuk, are you listening to me? His aunt's shoe connected with his ribs. Not hard enough to bruise, she'd learned to be careful, but enough to hurt. Minsuk gasped, the memory shattering. I asked if you cleaned the storage room yet. Your uncle needs space for the new liquor shipment. Yes, Aunt Yoonhee, he whispered. Speak up. Broken Omegas should at least have working mouths. Yes, Aunt Yoonhee. Louder this time. She sniffed, her perfectly manicured hand waving dismissively. Finish here, then go to your room. Minji is bringing her alpha suitor for dinner tomorrow, and I won't have you embarrassing us by being seen. The storage room. That's what they called it now. It used to be his bedroom, back when this was his home. Back before the fire that the police called accidental. Faulty wiring in the kitchen, they'd said. A tragedy. The Alpha and Omega owners had died in their sleep from smoke inhalation. Their 12-year-old son had barely survived. Minsuk remembered waking up in the hospital, his face wrapped in bandages, his throat raw from screaming. His uncle, his father's younger brother, had been standing at the foot of the bed with an expression that Minsuk was too young then to recognize as satisfaction. It's a miracle you survived, nephew, Park Dong-hyun had said softly. But I'm afraid the fire took more than your parents. Your scent glands. The doctors say they're permanently damaged. You'll never produce proper pheromones. No alpha will ever want to bond with you now. Minsuk had been too broken to cry. Too shocked to question why his uncle's clothes smelled like gasoline. Too traumatized to wonder why the faulty wiring had been inspected and approved just 2 weeks before. The funeral had been small. His mother's family couldn't afford to fly from Nigeria. The pack elders who had once criticized his parents' union now spoke in hushed tones about the tragedy of mixed bloodlines and what happens when Omegas forget their place. Park Dong-hyun had petitioned the courts for guardianship. He'd presented documents, forged, Minsuk would later discover, showing that his brother had left the restaurant to him in case of emergency. He'd promised the judge he would care for his orphan nephew, give him a home, a future. You understand, Minsuk, his uncle had said the day they'd left the courthouse, his hand gripping the back of Minsuk's neck hard enough to hurt. This restaurant is mine now. Your parents' dream? Gone. You're alive because I allow it. You eat because I permit it. And if you ever suggest otherwise, I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. That you're not just broken, but cursed. The Omega whose very existence killed his parents. Minsuk had been 12. Scarred. Terrified. Alone. He'd believed him. Now, at 24, Minsuk finished scrubbing the floor that had once been his father's kitchen. The kitchen where his mother had taught him to make jollof rice, where they danced between prep stations, where love had been the secret ingredient in every dish. The floor gleamed. Empty. Soulless. Just like him. He gathered the cleaning supplies and headed toward the storage room, his hood pulled low. Tomorrow his cousin would parade her alpha suitor through the restaurant his parents had built. Tomorrow he would hide, as always. But tonight, in the dark, he could still smell phantom traces of shea butter and kimchi. Tonight, he could still hear his mother's voice. Our son will grow up knowing that love doesn't need permission. Minsuk touched the scars on his face through the fabric of his hood. He'd grown up, yes. But he'd learned a different lesson entirely. Love was for whole Omegas. And he was broken beyond repair. Minsuk's alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning. Not that he needed it. His body had learned the rhythm of survival years ago. He reached for the small orange pill bottle on the makeshift shelf beside his sleeping mat, hands moving in the dark with practiced efficiency. 2 white tablets. The daily dose of scent suppressants that cost most of his meager allowance. The pittance his uncle claimed to pay him for his labor. Without them, the fractured mess of his scent glands would emit random, broken notes that made other Omegas uncomfortable and Alphas dismissive. With them, he was nearly scentless. A ghost. He swallowed them dry, feeling them scrape down his throat. The storage room was barely 6 feet by 8 feet, wedged between the walk-in freezer and the back exit. Boxes of napkins and industrial cleaning supplies crowded against one wall. His sleeping mat took up most of the floor space. A single light bulb hung from a wire overhead, and in winter, the cold from the freezer seeped through the thin wall until his breath turned to fog. This was home. Minsuk folded his mat and stacked it in the corner, then pulled on his work clothes, the same black pants and gray hoodie he wore every day. The restaurant opened at 11, which meant he had 6.5 hours to complete the morning prep work before his uncle arrived. The kitchen was dark and silent when he entered. He moved through it like a shadow, turning on lights, firing up the stoves, beginning the endless routine. Chop vegetables. Prepare banchan. Check inventory. Clean counters. Wash dishes from the night before that his uncle's hired cook always left for him. He was filleting mackerel when he heard footsteps on the stairs. You're still here? Minji stood in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in a silk robe that probably cost more than Min-suk earned in a year. His cousin was everything Seoul's Omega society prized: petite, fair-skinned, with perfectly functioning scent glands that produced a delicate blend of cherry blossoms and honey. At 22, she'd already rejected for alpha proposals, holding out for someone worthy of her station. "I'm preparing breakfast, as instructed," Min-suk said quietly, not looking up from the fish. "God, you reek of those suppressants. It's like standing next to a chemical plant." She wrinkled her nose dramatically. "How do you live with yourself, knowing you'll never produce a real scent? That no alpha will ever find you desirable." Min-suk's knife paused for just a fraction of a second. "I manage. Do you?" Minji moved closer, her expensive perfume cutting through the smell of fish and sesame oil. "I'm meeting Alpha Choi's son this weekend. He's from one of the founding families. Old money, incredible bloodline. His father owns half of Gangnam. Congratulations. Mother says he's very interested. We might announce our engagement by spring." She picked up a strawberry from the fruit Min-suk had been washing, examined it, then set it back down with a dismissive sound. "Can you imagine? Me, mated to an alpha from a founding family, while you sleep in a storage room and smell like broken plumbing. Minji, is that you, darling?" Aunt Yoonhee's voice drifted down from upstairs. Minji's expression shifted instantly, the cruelty melting into practiced sweetness. "Coming, mother." She lowered her voice, leaning close to Min-suk. "Don't forget to clean my bathroom today. And do it properly this time. I found a hair in my sink last week, and it was disgusting." She swept out, leaving Min-suk alone with the half-prepared fish and the weight of her words. The morning continued in its predictable pattern. At 7, his uncle descended from the family's upstairs apartment. The apartment that used to belong to Min-suk's parents, in the building they used to own. Park Dong-hyun was a heavyset alpha who'd never worked a day in an actual kitchen despite owning a restaurant. He'd transformed Harmony into Park's kitchen, stripped away his brother's fusion concept, and turned it into a generic Korean barbecue place that survived on location rather than quality. "The dining room better be spotless," he grunted, pouring himself coffee from the pot Min-suk had brewed. "We have a private party tonight. 20 people. You'll serve?" "Yes, uncle. And keep that hood on. I don't want customers losing their appetite." Min-suk's hands tightened around the knife handle. "Yes, uncle." Park Dong-hyun studied him with flat, calculating eyes. "You're lucky, you know. Lucky I took you in after the fire. Lucky I give you a roof over your head, food in your belly. Most Omega's as damaged as you would be on the streets." "I'm grateful, uncle." "Are you?" The alpha stepped closer, his imposing bulk casting Min-suk in shadow. "Because sometimes I think you forget your place. I see the way you look at things around here, like you're remembering something. But there's nothing to remember, Min-suk. This restaurant was always mine. Your parents were just managing it for me before their unfortunate accident." The lie sat between them, thick and poisonous. Min-suk had heard it so many times he almost believed it himself. "Almost. I understand, uncle." "Good." Park Dong-hyun clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to hurt. "Now finish prep. And take another suppressant before the party tonight. Your broken scent was bothering the customers last week." Min-suk had already taken his daily dose, but he nodded anyway. "Yes, uncle." The day crawled forward. Min-suk cleaned Minji's bathroom, scrubbed floors, prepped food, set tables, endured casual cruelty from the cooking staff who knew he couldn't fight back. By the time the private party began at 7, he'd been awake for almost 15 hours. He served 20 wealthy alphas and omegas, keeping his hood up, his eyes down, moving between tables like a ghost. They didn't see him. No one ever did. At midnight, when the last customer left and the kitchen was finally clean, Min-suk retreated to his storage room. His scent glands ached, a phantom pain from tissue that would never heal properly. He reached for the suppressant bottle, shook out 2 more pills even though he shouldn't take them this close to his morning dose. The alternative was worse. The alternative was smelling like burned flowers and broken promises. He swallowed the pills and lay down on his mat, staring at the ceiling where water damage had left stains that looked almost like constellations. Somewhere in Seoul, omegas slept in warm beds beside alphas who chose them. Somewhere, people lived in homes that loved them back. But not here. Not him. Min-suk closed his eyes and waited for tomorrow's alarm, already knowing it would be exactly the same as today. The rain came down in sheets, turning Seoul's back alleys into rivers of reflected neon. Min-suk pulled his hood tighter, plastic bags cutting into his wrists as he hurried through Itaewon's narrow streets. His uncle had sent him out at 11 p.m. for emergency supplies. The restaurant had run out of sesame oil during dinner service, and somehow that was Min-suk's fault. The The 24-hour market was 6 blocks away. Min-suk knew every shortcut, every alley that would get him there and back fastest. Time away from the restaurant was time his uncle could find new reasons to be angry. He was cutting through the alley behind the old shipping warehouse when he heard it, a sound that wasn't rain. Wet, labored breathing. A pained grunt. Min-suk froze. Every instinct screamed at him to keep walking. Nothing good happened in alleys at night. Nothing good happened to Omegas alone in the dark. But then he smelled it. Blood. Fresh and copper-sharp, cutting through the rain. He should have run. Instead, he moved toward the sound. The man was slumped against the warehouse wall, one hand pressed to his side where dark liquid seeped between his fingers. Even in the dim light from a distant street lamp, Min-suk could see the expensive cut of his suit, now ruined. The man's head was tilted back, rain washing over a face that was all sharp angles and controlled violence going soft with blood loss. Help! The word came out barely audible. Please! Min-suk's bags hit the ground. He was moving before his mind caught up with his body, dropping to his knees beside the stranger in the filthy alley water. Don't move, Min-suk said, hands already reaching for the man's jacket. Let me see. The man's eyes opened, black and unfocused. Alpha. Min-suk's damaged scent glands could still register that much. A powerful one, though his scent was distorted by pain and blood. Omega. The man breathed, something like surprise in his voice. Be quiet. Save your strength. Min-suk peeled back the jacket and hissed. 2 gunshot wounds, one in the side, one in the shoulder. Still bleeding, but not arterial. His mother's voice echoed in his memory, steady and calm from the nights she'd volunteered at the free clinic. Assess. Prioritize. Act. I'm going to apply pressure. It's going to hurt. Already, hurts. Min-suk yanked off his hoodie, wadded it up, and pressed it hard against the side wound. The man made a sound between a grunt and a growl, his hand suddenly gripping Min-suk's wrist with surprising strength. I know, Min-suk said quietly. But you'll bleed out if I don't. The grip loosened slightly. Those dark eyes focused on Min-suk's face, really focused, seeing him for the first time. Min-suk realized his hood had fallen back in his rush to help. The scars on his face were fully visible in the rain and dim light. He waited for the disgust, the dismissal. Instead, the man's expression shifted into something Min-suk couldn't read. You're beautiful. You're delirious from blood loss, Min-suk said, but his hands were gentle as he checked the shoulder wound. Less serious. He could work with this. Can you stand? We need to get you somewhere dry. Can't. Go to hospital. They'll find. I'm not taking you to a hospital. Min-suk was already thinking, calculating. The restaurant was too far. His uncle would kill him for bringing a stranger there anyway. But there was an abandoned shop 2 buildings down, one his mother used to talk about renting for a second location. He'd seen the broken lock last week. Can you walk if I help you? Think so. It took 10 agonizing minutes to half-carry, half-drag the man to the abandoned shop. Min-suk kicked open the door and maneuvered them inside, lowering the stranger onto a relatively clean tarp someone had left behind. Stay here. Don't die. I'll be right back. He ran back to the alley, grabbed his dropped bags and hoodie, then sprinted to the 24-hour market. He bought the sesame oil his uncle wanted, plus gauze, medical tape, bottled water, and a cheap bottle of soju, the closest thing to antiseptic he could afford. When he returned, the man was exactly where Min-suk had left him, conscious but pale. This is going to hurt worse than the pressure, Min-suk warned, uncapping the soju. Just do it. Min-suk poured alcohol directly into the wounds. The man's back arched, a sound ripping from his throat that was pure alpha dominance and pain combined. The broken windows rattled. Min-suk felt it in his damaged scent glands, a pull he hadn't experienced in years. He ignored it and kept working. His mother had taught him well. Clean the wound. Pack it with gauze. Tape it tight. The bullet in the shoulder had gone through cleanly. The side wound was worse, but manageable if the man didn't move too much. You have medical training, the man said, voice steadier now. His eyes never left Min-suk's face. My mother was a nurse. She taught me. Min-suk sat back on his heels, hands covered in blood. You need real medical attention. These are temporary measures. Can't. Not yet. The man struggled to sit up slightly, wincing. What's your name? Min-suk hesitated. Does it matter? You saved my life. It matters. Min-suk. Lee Min-suk. Jean, the man said after a pause. Call me Jean. The name was obviously fake, but Min-suk didn't press. Well, Jean, you were shot twice. You should probably tell someone. No one. Jin's hand caught Min-suk's wrist again, but gently this time. Promise me. No one can know about this. About you helping me. I'm not going to tell anyone. I don't exactly have people to tell. Jin's thumb brushed over Minsuk's pulse point, and his eyes widened slightly. Your scent, it's broken, I know. Minsuk pulled his hand away, reaching for his hood. My scent glands were damaged in a fire. I take suppressants, but they don't. No. Jin's voice was fierce despite his weakness. Not broken. Different. Like, he struggled for words, his delirious mind grasping. Like smoke and honey. Like something burning that still stays sweet. Minsuk froze. No one had described his scent as anything but wrong in 12 years. You're definitely delirious, he said softly. But Jin was still staring at him with those intense black eyes, and Minsuk suddenly understood he'd made a terrible mistake. Not in helping, he'd do that again, but in letting this alpha see him. Really see him. I have to go, Minsuk said, standing abruptly. Change those bandages tomorrow. Keep the wounds clean. Don't die. Wait, but Minsuk was already at the door, hood back up, bags in hand. Will I see you again? Jin called after him. Minsuk should have said no. Should have disappeared into the rain and never looked back. Instead, he paused. Maybe. Then he was gone, running through the rain toward a restaurant that wasn't his, a family that hated him, and a life that had just gotten infinitely more complicated. Behind him, in the abandoned shop, Kang Seo-jin, the most dangerous man in Seoul, pressed his hand to his bandaged wounds and smiled through the pain. He'd found something worth keeping. And what Kang Seo-jin wanted, he took. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and tell me where you're watching from. Minsuk was scrubbing the restaurant's front windows when the black sedan pulled up across the street. He barely glanced at it. Luxury cars were common in Itaewon. But then the back door opened, and a man in an expensive charcoal suit stepped out. Jin. Minsuk's hands stilled on the glass. It had been 3 days since the alley. 3 days of wondering if the man had survived, if he'd kept the wounds clean, if infection had set in. 3 days of telling himself it didn't matter, that he'd never see the stranger again. Jin crossed the street with the careful movements of someone still healing. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to speak without shouting, far enough to be respectful. You're a difficult man to find, Lee Minsuk. Minsuk glanced toward the restaurant's interior, where his uncle was meeting with a liquor distributor. You shouldn't be here. Then where should I be? Anywhere else. Minsuk returned to scrubbing, though his heart was racing. How did you find me? I asked around. An Omega who works in Itaewon, wears a hood, knows medical care. Surprisingly specific. Jin moved closer. His scent, cedar and smoke, pure undiluted alpha, washed over Minsuk despite the suppressants. Your bandaging was excellent, by the way. No infection. Good. Now leave before someone sees us talking. Have tea with me. Minsuk's hand slipped, the wet cloth smacking against the window. What? Tea. Tomorrow afternoon. There's a traditional house in Bukshin, very quiet, very private. No one will bother us there. Jin's voice was casual, but there was an intensity in his dark eyes that made Minsuk's damaged scent glands ache. You saved my life. Let me thank you properly. You don't owe me anything. Perhaps. But I'm asking anyway. Jin pulled a business card from his pocket and tucked it into the fold of Minsuk's hood. 2 o'clock. If you don't come, I'll understand. But I hope you do. He was back in the sedan before Minsuk could form a response, the vehicle disappearing into traffic like smoke. Minsuk pulled out the card. All it had was an address in Bukshin and a time, 2 p.m. No name. No phone number. He should throw it away. He slipped it into his pocket instead. The tea house was tucked between traditional hammocks in Bukshin's winding streets, the kind of place tourists walked past without noticing. Minsuk stood outside for 5 full minutes, debating whether this was the stupidest thing he'd ever done. Then Jin appeared in the doorway, and the decision was made. You came, Jin said, and there was genuine relief in his voice. I shouldn't have. But you did. That's what matters. Jin held the door open. Please. The interior was all dark wood and paper screens, private rooms branching off a central corridor. Jin led him to the furthest one, a small space with a low table, cushions on the floor, and a window overlooking a tiny garden. No one could see them here. No one would know. Sit, Jin said, lowering himself carefully onto a cushion. He still moved like his wounds pained him. Minsuk sat across the table, hood still up, hands folded in his lap. A woman appeared moments later with a tray, fragrant tea and small rice cakes. She didn't look at Minsuk, didn't ask questions. Just bowed and left. How did you afford this place? Minsuk asked. The tea house was clearly expensive, the kind of establishment that catered to Seoul's elite. I have resources. Jean poured tea with practiced elegance. Do you come to Buckshin often? Never. I don't leave Itaewon much except for errands. Why not? Minsuk touched his hood. You know why? Jean was quiet for a moment, studying him. May I ask what happened? To your face? Your scent glands. A fire. When I was 12. It killed my parents. I'm sorry. And Jean sounded like he meant it. Is that why you knew how to treat my wounds? Because of the fire? No. My mother taught me before she died. She was a nurse. Minsuk sipped his tea, letting the warmth spread through him. She used to say that healing was the most important skill anyone could learn. That being able to help someone in their worst moment was a gift. She was right. Jean leaned forward slightly. You could have left me in that alley. Most people would have. Most people aren't omegas who remember what it's like to need help and have no one come. The words hung between them, too honest, too raw. Minsuk regretted them immediately. But Jean didn't look away. Didn't judge. Then I'm grateful you're not most people. They talked for an hour. Jean asked questions, careful ones, never pushing too hard. What did Minsuk like to read? What did he remember about his parents' restaurant? If he could go anywhere in Seoul, where would it be? No one had asked Minsuk about himself in years. No one had cared about his thoughts, his memories, his dreams. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Will you meet me again? Jean asked as they prepared to leave. Same time next week? Minsuk knew he should say no. This was dangerous. Jean was clearly someone important, someone powerful. And Minsuk was. Minsuk. Broken. Worthless. A servant in a storage room. Yes, he heard himself say. Jean smiled. A real smile that transformed his severe features into something almost gentle. Good. They met every week for a month. Always the same tea house, the same private room, the same careful dance of conversation. Jean never pressed for more than Minsuk was willing to give. Never asked about his uncle, or why a 24-year-old Omega lived like a servant. Never demanded to see beneath the hood. But slowly, Minsuk began to unfold. He told Jean about his mother's jollof rice, his father's terrible singing, the way they used to dance in the kitchen. He talked about the books he read in his storage room when he couldn't sleep, the stray cats he fed behind the restaurant, the small rebellions that kept him sane. And Jean listened. Really listened. Like every word mattered. Why do you keep meeting me? Minsuk asked during their 5th meeting. You've thanked me for saving your life. You don't owe me anything more. Jean set down his teacup, his dark eyes intense. Because when I look at you, I don't see what's broken. I see what survived. And that's infinitely more interesting than perfection. Minsuk's breath caught. Besides, Jean continued, voice softer now, you're the only person in Seoul who talks to me like I'm human. Do you know how rare that is? You're an alpha. People must. People fear me. Respect me. Want things from me. But you. Jin's smile was crooked. You told me to stop moving because I'd reopen my wounds. You scolded me like I was a child. No one scolds me, Minsuk. Maybe they should. Jean laughed, a real, genuine sound that made Minsuk's damaged scent glands pulse with something warm and unfamiliar. Then, before he could stop himself, Minsuk reached up and pulled back his hood. The scars were fully visible in the afternoon light streaming through the window. Twisted tissue across his left cheek and jaw. The damaged scent gland at his neck that would never work properly again. All the evidence of the fire that had destroyed his life. Jean went very still. Minsuk waited for the disgust. The pity. The careful look away that people always did. Instead, Jean reached across the table and traced one finger along the scar on Minsuk's cheek. Gentle, reverent, like touching something precious. Thank you, Jean whispered. For what? For trusting me with this. With you. And for the first time in 12 years, Minsuk felt seen. Not as damaged goods. Not as a broken Omega. But as himself. It was the most terrifying and beautiful feeling he'd ever known. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in a cream-colored envelope so thick and expensive that Minsuk's aunt literally gasped when she opened it. Donghyun. Donghyun, come here right now. Minsuk was washing breakfast dishes in the kitchen, but he could hear everything through the thin walls. His uncle's heavy footsteps descended the stairs, followed by the rustle of paper. What is this? Park Donghyun's voice was sharp with suspicion. It's an invitation to the Seoul Alpha Summit Gala. The Seoul Alpha Summit, Donghyun. Aunt Yoon, he sounded like she might faint from excitement. This is the most exclusive event in Korea. Only the most powerful alphas and their families receive invitations. How did we? Let me see that. Silence. Minsuk slowed his dishwashing, straining to hear. It's legitimate. his uncle said finally, wonder creeping into his voice. The seal is real. The hosting committee. These are the founding families. The Chables. Old money. Real power. But why us? We're not. I mean, the restaurant is successful, but we're not that level. Perhaps someone noticed our contributions to the business community, Park Dong-hyun said, his voice taking on the pompous tone he used when lying to himself. We have been making quite a name for ourselves. Min-suk gripped the edge of the sink. His father's restaurant had been featured in Michelin guides. His parents had been invited to cook for foreign dignitaries. That had been making a name. What his uncle ran was barely breaking even. We'll need new clothes, Aunt Yoon-hee was saying, her voice climbing with excitement. Minji will need a proper gown. This could be her chance to meet an alpha from a founding family, a real match, not these middle-tier suitors who've been calling. Mother? What's happening? Minji's sleepy voice joined the conversation. Within moments, the upstairs apartment erupted in squealing and planning. Min-suk returned to his dishes, each plate scrubbed with mechanical precision. He should have known better than to hope. Absolutely not. Park Dong-hyun stood in the kitchen doorway that evening, arms crossed, his expression thunderous. Min-suk had made the mistake of asking, just asking, if he might be able to attend the gala as well. It's a family invitation, uncle. I'm family. You are an embarrassment. His uncle's voice was flat, matter of fact. Do you think I'm going to parade a broken Omega in front of Seoul's elite? Have you seen yourself, Min-suk? Actually looked in a mirror? I just thought. You thought wrong. This is our chance to elevate this family's standing. Minji could catch the eye of a powerful alpha. I could make connections that would secure our future for generations. Park Dong-hyun stepped closer, lowering his voice to something almost pitying. You think anyone at that gala wants to see a scarred Omega who smells like chemical suppressants? You'd ruin everything just by existing in the same room. Min-suk's hands trembled at his sides. I understand, uncle. Do you? Because I'm not sure you do. His uncle's expression hardened. You will not attend. You will not ask again. And on the night of the gala, you will stay here, out of sight like you should. Am I clear? Yes, uncle. Good. Now clean the freezer. It smells like something died in there. Min-suk threw himself into work for the next 3 days, trying not to think about the gala or the way his family discussed it constantly. The guest list, the venue, what it all meant for their social standing. Trying not to think about how he'd never be part of that world, how he'd always be the dirty secret locked in the storage room. Trying not to think about Jean. Their next meeting was supposed to be Thursday at 2. Min-suk arrived at the tea house 15 minutes early, his heart doing something stupid and hopeful in his chest. Jean didn't come. Min-suk waited for 2 hours, drinking tea he couldn't taste, watching the door. At 4 o'clock, the tea house owner gently suggested he leave. They needed the room for another reservation. Maybe Jean had been delayed. Maybe something had come up. Min-suk went back the following Thursday. And the Thursday after that. Jean never appeared. By the 3rd week, the tea house owner recognized him with pitying eyes. Your friend hasn't made a reservation, dear. Perhaps you should stop coming. Min-suk walked back to Itaewon in the rain, hood pulled low, something cold and heavy settling in his chest. Of course Jean had stopped coming. Why wouldn't he? He'd satisfied his curiosity about the scarred Omega who'd saved him. Had his fun playing at friendship with someone beneath his station, and now he was done. Min-suk had been an idiot to think it meant anything more. The storage room felt smaller than usual that night. The walls pressed in, the cold seeped deeper, and Min-suk couldn't stop seeing Jin's face when he'd traced the scars, couldn't stop hearing the warmth in his voice. When I look at you, I don't see what's broken. Lies. All of it. On Sunday, his aunt demanded Min-suk clean out the upstairs storage closet. The one that had once belonged to his parents, now stuffed with his uncle's family's overflowed junk. I need space for Minji's new gala gown, Aunt Yoon-hee said. Get rid of anything useless. Min-suk climbed the narrow stairs to the apartment he hadn't entered in years. The closet was cramped and dusty, filled with boxes of old tax documents, broken appliances, random knickknacks his uncle hoarded for no reason. At the very back, pushed into the corner and covered with a stained sheet, Min-suk found a trunk. His hands froze on the latch. He knew this trunk. His mother had kept it in her bedroom, had stored her precious things inside. Things from Nigeria, from her life before Korea, from the early days of her marriage. Min-suk glanced toward the door. His aunt was downstairs, his uncle at the restaurant, Minji out shopping. He was alone. He opened the trunk. The scent hit him first, faint after all these years, but unmistakable. Shea butter and vanilla. His mother's scent preserved in fabric. Min-suk's damaged scent glands throbbed, trying desperately to hold on to something they'd lost 12 years ago. Inside, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, was his mother's traditional hanbok, the one she'd worn for special occasions. Deep blue silk with gold embroidery, the kind of craftsmanship that cost a fortune and lasted generations. Beneath it were photo albums, letters in Igbo that Min-suk couldn't read, small jewelry boxes, and photographs. Min-suk lifted them with shaking hands. His parents on their wedding day. His father in a traditional hanbok, his mother in a white dress and traditional Nigerian gele, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery. His mother pregnant, glowing, standing in the restaurant kitchen. His father holding baby Min-suk, his expression pure wonder. The three of them together, a family, whole and happy and alive. "We built something beautiful," his mother had said in one of his last clear memories of her. "This restaurant, this life, you. All of it beautiful, my sweet boy." Min-suk pressed the photographs to his chest, tears burning tracks down his scarred face. They'd been beautiful. They'd been happy. They'd loved him unconditionally, had never once made him feel like he was too much or not enough or broken. And his uncle had stolen it all. The hanbok seemed to shimmer in the dim closet light, the gold embroidery catching like stars. His mother had worn this to cook for important guests, to attend business dinners, to celebrate the restaurant's success. She'd been proud of who she was, had never hidden or apologized. Min-suk ran his fingers over the silk, feeling the quality, the care. His mother had been 5 inches taller than him, but the hanbok could be adjusted, could be worn, could be his connection to everything he'd lost. "Min-suk, are you finished up there?" His aunt's voice shattered the moment. Min-suk quickly closed the trunk, pushing it back into the corner, covering it with the sheet. "Almost done," he called back. But he took one photograph, his parents together, laughing alive. He slipped it into his pocket, a tiny rebellion, a piece of them he refused to let his uncle keep locked away. That night, in his storage room, Min-suk stared at the photograph by the light of his single bulb. Jean was gone. The gala was in 2 weeks. His family was planning their grand entrance into Seoul's elite while he scrubbed their floors. Nothing had changed. Except, Min-suk traced his mother's face in the photograph. She'd been brave. She'd been bold. She'd built a life on her own terms despite everyone saying it was impossible. Maybe her son could do the same. Maybe. The knock came at 7 p.m., exactly 2 hours before the gala was scheduled to begin. Min-suk was in his storage room, trying to convince himself that wearing his mother's hanbok wasn't the most reckless thing he'd ever considered. The silk felt impossibly delicate against his scarred skin, the weight of it both foreign and familiar. His mother had been taller, but he'd managed to adjust the fit well enough. In the cracked mirror propped against the wall, he almost didn't recognize himself. The knock came again, insistent. Not his uncle's pounding or his aunt's impatient rapping. This was deliberate, professional. Min-suk opened the back door to find 2 people in immaculate black suits, a woman with sharp eyes and a man built like a wall. Between them sat a garment bag and a sleek black box. "Lee Min-suk?" the woman asked. His heart stopped. "Who's asking?" "We're here on behalf of someone who wishes you to attend the Seoul Alpha Summit Gala tonight." She held out the garment bag. "He apologizes for his absence these past weeks. Business required his full attention. But he hopes you'll accept this invitation." Jean. It had to be Jean. Min-suk's hands trembled as he took the bag. Inside was a geoggery jacket in deep midnight blue with silver embroidery, modern, perfectly tailored, designed to layer over the traditional hanbok he was already wearing. The black box contained shoes, accessories, and a small card with 2 words in elegant script. "Forgive me." "There's a car waiting," the man said. "If you wish to attend." Min-suk looked down at himself, at his mother's hanbok, at the gifts from a man whose real name he didn't even know. Every rational part of his brain screamed that this was insane. His uncle was already at the gala with his family. If they saw him there. But his mother's voice whispered in his memory, "We built something beautiful." "Give me 5 minutes," Min-suk said. The Shilla Hotel's grand ballroom was something out of a dream, or a nightmare, depending on your perspective. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across polished marble floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's glittering skyline. And everywhere, were alphas and omegas who represented the absolute pinnacle of Korean society. Min-suk stood just inside the entrance, his hood deliberately left behind in the car, his scars on full display beneath the soft lighting. The midnight blue geoggery jean had sent fit perfectly over his mother's hanbok, the combination traditional and modern at once. He'd never worn anything so fine. Had never stood in a room like this. A server passed with champagne. Min-suk took a glass just to have something to hold, something to keep his hands from shaking. Did you see the ice sculpture? Someone murmured nearby. Tacky. The parks are trying too hard. Min-suk's attention sharpened. He drifted closer to the conversation. Two elegant omegas in designer hanbok, their scents perfectly curated. I heard Park Dong-hyun practically bought his way into this event, one was saying. Donations to every committee member's favorite charity. So desperate. Well, his daughter is pretty enough. Maybe she'll catch someone's eye. If they can overlook her mother's nouveau riche desperation. Min-suk almost smiled. So his uncle wasn't the success story he pretended to be. Even here, among Seoul's elite, the parks were seen as climbers. Pretenders. He moved through the ballroom like a ghost, observing everything. The alphas clustered in groups, discussing business deals and political alliances. The omegas displayed like prizes, their beauty and bloodlines the subject of careful evaluation. Servers glided between guests. A string quartet played in the corner. This was the world he'd been excluded from. The world that had decided he wasn't worthy. It was beautiful and hollow and utterly predictable. Excuse me, but I don't believe we've met. Min-suk turned to find an older alpha studying him with curious eyes. I'm sorry, I don't. Kim Taeyong. I run the hospitality division for Silla Corporation. The alpha's gaze dropped to Min-suk's scars without flinching. That's an interesting combination you're wearing. Traditional hanbok with a modern overlay. The craftsmanship is exceptional. Thank you. The hanbok was my mother's. Was she in fashion? No. She was a chef. She and my father ran a restaurant in Itaewon. The words came out before Min-suk could stop them, proud and clear. Kim Taeyong's eyebrows rose. A chef? How wonderful. My late wife was passionate about food. She always said the best meals came from places with heart, not just skill. He smiled, genuinely warm. I hope you enjoy the evening. He moved on, leaving Min-suk standing there, slightly dazed. Someone had spoken to him like a person. Had seen his scars and didn't care. Had valued his parents' profession. Maybe this world wasn't entirely hollow. Then he heard his cousin's voice, sharp with shock. Min-suk. He turned slowly. Minji stood 10 feet away in an elaborate pink gown, her perfect face twisted in disbelief. Beside her, Aunt Yoonhee's expression cycled rapidly from confusion to recognition to absolute horror. What are you doing here? Minji hissed, closing the distance between them. How did you mother? It's him. It's actually him. I can see that. Aunt Yoonhee's voice was ice. Min-suk, you need to leave. Right now. I was invited. Invited? Minji's laugh was shrill. You? Who would invite you? Look at you. You're wearing traditional dress to a modern gala. You reek of suppressants. And those scars are none of your concern, Min-suk said quietly. But Minji was already turning, her voice rising to carry across the nearby guests. Everyone, I apologize. This is my cousin. He wasn't supposed to be here. He's not well. We've been trying to get him help, but... Minji, stop, Min-suk said. Why should I? You're embarrassing us. You're embarrassing yourself. She turned to the growing circle of onlookers, her expression shifting to practiced concern. My cousin had an accident years ago. It affected his mind as well as his appearance. He sometimes has delusions about being part of society events. I'm not delusional. Then why are you here? Minji's mask cracked, real cruelty bleeding through. Did you steal that hanbok? Is that mother's jewelry? Oh my God, you stole from us to dress up and play pretend. That hanbok belonged to my mother. Min-suk's voice was steel. As did everything I'm wearing. It's mine by right. Your mother? Aunt Yoonhee stepped forward, her face flushed. That broken woman who filled your father's head with nonsense about fusion cuisine? Who couldn't even keep her restaurant from burning down. The room had gone very quiet. Min-suk felt eyes on him from every direction, curious, pitying, judging. My mother was brilliant, he said softly. And my father loved her. They built something beautiful together. They built a death trap that killed them both and ruined you, Minji snapped. Look at yourself, Min-suk. You're damaged. Broken. Your scent glands don't even work properly. What alpha would ever want you? Minji, that's enough, someone said from the crowd. But she was on a roll now, her voice climbing. No, someone needs to say it. He lives in our storage room. He scrubs our floors. He exists because we're charitable enough to feed him. And he repays us by stealing and sneaking into events where he doesn't belong. The hanbok is mine. Min-suk's voice cracked. Everything my parents built was mine, and your father stole it. He stole the restaurant. He stole their legacy. He stole my life. How dare you? Park Dong-hyun's voice boomed across the ballroom. Min-suk's uncle pushed through the crowd, his face purple with rage. He grabbed Minsuk's arm hard enough to bruise, his alpha dominance rolling out in waves meant to force submission. You ungrateful little. I took you in when no one else would. I gave you a home, food, a purpose. And this is how you repay me? With lies and theft and delusions. It's not a lie, Minsuk said, but his voice was small now, breaking. Guards, Park Dong-hyun called. This Omega snuck in without an invitation. He's been making wild accusations and disturbing the guests. Please escort him out. 2 security personnel started toward them. No, wait, I was invited. By who? Minji demanded. Who would invite broken goods like you to the Seoul Alpha Summit? The phrase hung in the air. Broken goods. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like poison. Minsuk saw the looks, the judgment, the pity. Some people turned away, embarrassed for him. Others stared with cruel fascination. I was invited, Minsuk repeated, but it sounded weak even to his own ears. The security guards were almost to him. His uncle's hand was still vice-tight on his arm. Minji looked triumphant. Aunt Yoon, he was already apologizing profusely to nearby guests. This was it. The moment Minsuk would be dragged out in humiliation, would return to his storage room, would disappear back into invisibility. He'd been an idiot to think he could be anything more. Then, he was invited by me. The voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. Deep. Commanding. Absolute. The crowd parted. And Kong Seo-jin stepped into the light. Before I tell you what happens next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and tell me where you're watching from. He was exactly as Minsuk remembered, sharp features, dark eyes, tattooed hands, but somehow more. The expensive suit was perfectly tailored, emphasizing broad shoulders and lethal grace. His presence didn't fill the room so much as consume it, every eye drawn to him like gravity. But it was the silence that told the real story. The absolute, suffocating silence as Seoul's most powerful people recognized the man walking toward Minsuk. Jin, Minsuk whispered. Kong Seo-jin, his uncle breathed, and the color drained from his face. The Kionsa Syndicate. The whispers erupted like wildfire. That's Kong Seo-jin, the one who controls half of Seoul's. I heard he once made an entire corporation disappear. Why is he here? Seo-jin stopped directly in front of Minsuk, ignoring everyone else in the ballroom. His hand came up, fingers gentle as they traced the scars on Minsuk's cheek. The same gesture from the tea house, but here now, in front of hundreds of witnesses. I apologize for my absence, Seo-jin said softly. I had to prepare something special for tonight. You're Jin, Minsuk said, still processing. You're actually. I'm the man who invited you here. The man who sent the car, the clothes, the invitation your uncle received. Seo-jin's smile was sharp as a blade. Did you think the Parks merited an invitation on their own? Park Dong-hyun made a strangled sound. Seo-jin finally turned to face him, and Minsuk felt the temperature in the room drop. You put your hands on what's mine. That was your first mistake. I didn't know, he's my nephew, I was just. Your second mistake was believing I wouldn't find out what you did 12 years ago. Seo-jin's voice was casual, conversational, which made it infinitely more terrifying. The fire wasn't an accident, was it, Park Dong-hyun? The ballroom went silent again. Minsuk's heart hammered against his ribs. I don't know what you're talking about, his uncle stammered. No. Should I present the evidence here? The gasoline purchases you made the week before? The insurance investigator you bribed? The witness who saw you leave the restaurant at 3 a.m. the night of the fire? Seo-jin tilted his head. Or should I save that for the prosecutors I've already contacted? Park Dong-hyun's face went from white to gray. Beside him, Aunt Yoon, he swayed like she might faint. Minji just stared, her perfect composure finally cracking. You killed your own brother, Seo-jin continued, his voice cutting through the shocked murmurs. You murdered his wife. You tried to kill their 12-year-old son. And when he survived, you stole everything that was his and locked him in a storage room for 12 years. He paused. Did I miss anything? This is you can't prove. I can prove everything. And I will. Seo-jin turned back to Minsuk, his expression softening. But first, I need to do something I should have done weeks ago. He took both of Minsuk's hands in his, and Minsuk realized what was happening a heartbeat before Seo-jin dropped to one knee. No, Minsuk whispered. You can't. Lee Minsuk, Seo-jin said, loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. You saved my life without knowing who I was. You showed me kindness when you had every reason to be bitter. You trusted me with your scars, your story, your truth. His thumbs brushed over Minsuk's knuckles. I'm asking you, in front of everyone here, to let me give you back everything that was stolen. To let me stand beside you. To let me claim you as mine. The traditional claiming words. Spoken publicly, they were as binding as any ceremony. I'm broken, Minsuk said, tears burning his eyes. My scent glands don't work. I'm scarred. I'm perfect, Seojin interrupted. You're absolutely perfect. Then he rose, pulled Minsuk close, and pressed his face to the damaged scent gland at Minsuk's neck. The scent marking was supposed to be private, intimate. But Seojin did it here, now, in front of Seoul's elite. His scent, cedar and smoke and pure alpha dominance, rolled over Minsuk in waves. Even through the suppressants, even through the broken glands, Minsuk felt it sink into his skin, claiming him on a level deeper than words. When Seojin pulled back, his eyes were molten. This Omega is mine. Anyone who harms him, insults him, or questions his worth answers to me. Is that clear? The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers, but no one dared disagree. Seojin turned to the string quartet, who had stopped playing somewhere during the confrontation. Music. Now. They started immediately. A traditional waltz, the kind played at formal bonding ceremonies. I can't dance, Minsuk said as Seojin pulled him toward the center of the floor. Then I'll teach you. Seojin's hand settled at his waist, the other clasping Minsuk's fingers. Just follow me. The crowd parted as they moved onto the empty dance floor. Every eye in the ballroom watched as the most dangerous alpha in Seoul held a scarred Omega in traditional hanbok and began to dance. Minsuk stumbled at first, overwhelmed and terrified and still processing that this was real. But Seojin was patient, his lead strong and sure, guiding Minsuk through each step. Why? Minsuk finally asked. Why me? Because you're the only person in Seoul who looks at me and sees a man instead of a weapon. Seojin pulled him closer. Because you scolded me for moving too much with a bullet wound. Because you taste tea like it's precious. Because you survived 12 years of hell and still have kindness left in you. He leaned in, his breath warm against Minsuk's ear. And because the first time I caught your scent, that broken, beautiful scent, every alpha instinct I have said mine. Minsuk's damaged scent glands pulsed, trying desperately to respond, to scent mark back. It barely worked, just a faint ghost of what it should be. But Seojin inhaled deeply, like it was the finest perfume. Smoke and honey, he murmured. Perfect. They danced while the crowd watched in silence. They danced while Park Dong-hyun stood frozen, his empire crumbling around him. They danced while Minji's perfect life shattered. They danced while Seoul's elite whispered and gossiped and tried to understand how this had happened. And Minsuk, for the first time in 12 years, felt like he was exactly where he belonged. In the arms of an alpha who chose him. Not despite his scars, but with full knowledge of every broken piece. When the music ended, Seojin didn't let go. Instead, he raised Minsuk's scarred hand to his lips and kissed it, gentle and reverent. Mine, he said again. And the ballroom erupted in applause. The applause was still fading when Seojin raised one hand, and the ballroom fell silent again. Minsuk stood beside him, still processing everything, his hand clasped firmly in Seojin's grip. Before we continue celebrating, Seojin said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, there's one more matter to address. He gestured, and the woman who'd brought Minsuk to the gala appeared, carrying a slim tablet. She handed it to Seojin with a small bow. Park Dong-hyun, Seojin continued, turning toward Minsuk's uncle, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. You've operated for 12 years under the assumption that your crimes were buried deep enough. That a 12-year-old boy was too traumatized to remember. That money and intimidation could rewrite history. I don't know what lies this boy has told you. I'm not interested in lies. Only facts. Seojin tapped the tablet. Shall we start with the insurance investigator? Jung Kwang-ho. You paid him 200 million won to rule the fire as accidental faulty wiring. He's already given a full confession to the prosecutors. Would you like to hear the recording? Park Dong-hyun's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. No. Then let's discuss the gasoline purchases. 3 separate stations, paid in cash, the week before the fire. We have security footage from 2 of them. The timestamps match your work schedule perfectly. Seojin swiped the screen. Or should we talk about the witness? The homeless man who saw you leaving Harmony Restaurant at 3 a.m. the night of the fire, carrying a red container. He's been living in Busan for the past 12 years, too afraid to come forward. My people found him last month. He's ready to testify. The ballroom had gone deathly silent. Every phone was down, every conversation stopped. This was no longer just a gala, it was a public execution. You killed my father, Minsuk said, his voice shaking. Your own brother. Park Dong-hyun's face twisted. He didn't deserve the restaurant. I was the one who helped him get the loan. I was the one who introduced him to suppliers. And what did he do? Married that foreign Omega and acted like he built everything himself. So you murdered him. Seojin's voice was ice. You doused the kitchen in gasoline while they slept. You set the fire and locked the doors from the outside. You planned to kill all three of them. No, the boy wasn't supposed to. Park Dong-hyun caught himself, but too late. Wasn't supposed to survive? Seojin finished. Yes, that's the conclusion I came to as well. Which brings us to the second crime. Min-suk felt cold wash through him. Second, Seojin's expression was gentle when he looked at Min-suk, but his words were brutal. The attack that damaged your scent glands. 6 months after the fire. Do you remember the men who did it? Min-suk's hand went to his neck involuntarily. There were 3 of them. In an alley near the hospital where I had follow-up appointments. They said I was an abomination, that mixed-blood omegas didn't deserve to exist. They held me down and, his voice broke. They burned my scent glands with cigarettes until they stopped working. The sound that went through the crowd was pure horror. Those men, Seojin said quietly, were hired by your uncle. Paid 50 million won to make sure you could never bond with an alpha, could never be seen as desirable, could never escape his control. No, Min-suk whispered. You're insane, Park Dong-hyun shouted. I would never. I took him in. I cared for him. You locked him in a storage room and treated him like a servant for 12 years. Seojin's calm finally cracked, rage bleeding through. You stole his inheritance, his restaurant, his future. And when you realized he might still grow up to claim what was his, you paid thugs to destroy him so completely that no alpha would ever want him. You made him unmarriageable. Worthless in Omegaverse society. Dependent on you forever. Park Dong-hyun was shaking now, sweat beading on his forehead. You can't prove. 2 of the 3 men are already in custody. They've confessed. Bank records show the payment from your account to theirs. Seojin's smile was predatory. I can prove everything, Park Dong-hyun. Every single crime. Every lie. Every cruelty. The authorities have been notified, the woman with the tablet said, stepping forward. Prosecutors are filing charges for first-degree murder, attempted murder of a minor, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Assets have been frozen as of 20 minutes ago. As if on cue, sirens wailed outside the hotel. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Min-suk could see police cars pulling up, their lights painting the building in red and blue. Aunt Yoon, he let out a strangled sob. Min-ji stood frozen, her face blank with shock. No, Park Dong-hyun said. No, you can't. I have connections. I have lawyers. And I have the truth. Seojin's voice cut through the panic. Along with resources you can't imagine. You're done, Park Dong-hyun. The restaurant will be returned to its rightful owner. Your assets will be liquidated to pay restitution. And you'll spend the rest of your life in prison, wondering if it was worth it. Police officers entered the ballroom, their presence surreal against the crystal and silk. They moved directly toward Park Dong-hyun, who backed up instinctively. Lee Min-suk, one officer said, approaching carefully. We'll need your statement, but not tonight. Tonight you should. He's with me, Seojin said. Anything you need can wait until tomorrow. The officer glanced between them, noting the scent marking, the protective stance. Understood. We'll be in touch. They took Park Dong-hyun away in handcuffs, his protests echoing through the ballroom until the doors closed. Aunt Yoon, he was escorted out for questioning, still crying. Min-ji followed in silence, her perfect life shattered beyond repair. Min-suk watched them go, feeling nothing and everything at once. 12 years of captivity, of abuse, of believing he deserved it. And it had all been a lie. A crime. A calculated destruction of a 12-year-old boy who'd survived when he wasn't supposed to. Min-suk. Seojin's hand cupped his face gently. Stay with me. He destroyed my scent glands on purpose, Min-suk said, the words hollow. So no alpha would want me. So I'd be trapped. And he failed. Seojin pulled him close, scent marking again, grounding him. You're not trapped. You're not unwanted. And your scent is perfect exactly as it is. Min-suk buried his face in Seojin's shoulder and finally let himself break. 12 years of holding everything together, of surviving, of enduring. It poured out of him in silent sobs while Seoul's elite watched the most dangerous alpha in Korea hold a broken omega and whisper promises of safety. Justice had been served. But healing would take longer. 6 months after the gala, Min-suk stood in front of the restaurant that had once been called Harmony. The sign had been taken down years ago, replaced with his uncle's generic branding. Now the space above the door was empty, waiting. What do you think? Seojin asked, coming to stand beside him. Keep the original name or choose something new? Min-suk studied the building, the place where his parents had built their dream, where he'd learned to cook at his mother's side, where everything had been stolen in fire and lies. The place that was finally, legally, irrevocably his again. The Haven, he said quietly. I want to call it the Haven. Seo-jin's hand found his, fingers intertwining. Perfect. The legal proceedings had been swift once the evidence was presented. Park Dong-hyun was serving 25 to life for murder, attempted murder, and a list of other crimes. His assets had been liquidated, with the majority going to Min-suk as restitution. Aunt Yoon-hee faced charges for conspiracy and fraud. Min-ji, who'd claimed ignorance of her father's crimes, had disappeared from Seoul society entirely. And Min-suk had gotten back everything. The restaurant, his parents' savings, the building they'd owned. It was more money than he'd ever imagined having. More than he knew what to do with. That's when the idea had come. You don't have to do this, Seo-jin had said when Min-suk first proposed it. You could sell the building, start fresh somewhere else. Leave all the memories behind. I don't want to leave them behind, Min-suk had replied. I want to transform them. Make something good from something terrible. So the Haven was born, not just a restaurant, but a sanctuary. The upstairs apartment where Min-suk's family had lived, where his uncle's family had erased them, was being converted into a safe space for Omegas who'd been rejected, traumatized, or abused. The restaurant below would provide job training, community, and purpose. Dr. Yoon says the first residents can move in next month, Min-suk said, watching construction workers move through the building. 5 Omegas to start. We'll see how it goes from there. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai was Min-suk's therapist, a recommendation from Seo-jin, though the alpha had been careful to let Min-suk make his own choice. Twice a week for 6 months, Min-suk had sat in her office and slowly, painfully unpacked 12 years of trauma. You survived, Dr. Yoon had told him during their first session. But survival isn't the same as living. We're going to work on helping you do both. It had been brutal. Confronting the PTSD from the fire, from the attack on his scent glands, from years of psychological abuse. Learning to recognize the internalized shame his uncle had planted so carefully. Understanding that his worth wasn't tied to his appearance or his ability to produce perfect pheromones. The scars don't make you broken, Dr. Yoon had said gently. They make you a survivor. There's a difference. Min-suk was starting to believe her. How are you feeling? Seo-jin asked now, his thumb brushing over Min-suk's knuckles. About all of this? Terrified, Min-suk admitted. What if I can't help them? What if the Haven fails? What if? What if it succeeds? Seo-jin interrupted. What if you create exactly what you needed 12 years ago? What if you save someone the way I wish someone had saved you? Min-suk leaned into him, breathing in cedar and smoke. Seo-jin's scent had become home over the past 6 months. A constant presence that grounded him when the memories got too heavy. They'd been living together in Seo-jin's penthouse, taking things slowly despite the public claiming at the gala. Seo-jin had been patient, never pushing, always waiting for Min-suk to be ready. I think, Min-suk said carefully, I'm ready. Seo-jin went very still. Ready for? The bond. The real one. Min-suk pulled back to meet his eyes. I know we're already claimed publicly, but I want the mating bite. I want everything. The intensity in Seo-jin's gaze could have melted steel. Are you sure? There's no rush, Min-suk. We have time. I'm sure. And he was. 6 months of therapy, of healing, of learning to trust. 6 months of Seo-jin proving every single day that he chose Min-suk not despite his damage, but with full acceptance of every scarred piece. I want to be yours completely. And I want you to be mine. Seo-jin cupped his face with both hands, careful and reverent. Tonight. The mating bite happened in Seo-jin's bedroom, with the city lights of Seoul spread below them like stars. Seo-jin had been impossibly gentle, his hands mapping every scar, his mouth following with kisses that felt like prayers. You're so beautiful, he murmured against Min-suk's skin. So perfect. I'm not perfect, Min-suk said, but there was no shame in it anymore. Just truth. Perfect for me, then. Seo-jin's teeth grazed the junction of his neck and shoulder, the traditional bonding spot, right above the damaged scent gland. Last chance to change your mind. Never. The bite was sharp and claiming and permanent. Min-suk gasped as Seo-jin's teeth broke skin, as the alpha's scent flooded his system, as something ancient and fundamental clicked into place. Even his damaged scent glands responded, producing a faint burst of that broken smoke and honey scent that Seo-jin loved. When it was done, Seo-jin licked the wound closed and pulled Min-suk close, both of them trembling. Mine, Seo-jin whispered. Yours, Min-suk agreed. And you're mine too. Always. 3 months later, the Haven opened its doors. The restaurant served fusion cuisine, Korean and Nigerian, just like Min-suk's parents had dreamed. The upstairs housed 8 Omegas now, each with their own story of rejection and survival. Min-suk stood in the kitchen on opening night, wearing his mother's hanbok under a chef's apron, and felt her presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. His father's recipes were pinned to the wall beside his mother's. Their photos hung in the dining room, smiling and proud. "Order up," called one of the Omega residents, a young man named Taemin who'd been rejected by his pack for being too feminine. He'd found his place in the Haven's kitchen, his natural talent for pastry finally recognized. Coming, Min-suk plated the jollof rice and kimchi stew, his signature dish, the one that honored both his parents equally. Seo-jin was waiting at a corner table, the one with the best view of both the kitchen and the dining room. He'd insisted on being present for opening night, though he'd promised to stay out of the way. "How's it going?" he asked when Min-suk brought him a plate. "Terrifying. Amazing. Perfect." Min-suk slid into the seat across from him, allowing himself this brief break. "We're fully booked for the next 2 weeks. I'm not surprised. The food is incredible." Seo-jin tasted the jollof rice and closed his eyes. "Your mother would be proud." "I think she would." Min-suk touched his neck, where Seo-jin's mating bite had healed into a permanent mark. "I think they both would." Through the kitchen door, he could hear Taemin laughing with another resident. Could see tables full of customers, some who came for the food, some who came to support the mission. The Haven was more than a restaurant. It was proof that broken things could be rebuilt into something stronger. "Do you ever regret it?" Min-suk asked quietly. "Choosing me? You could have had any Omega in Seoul. Someone without scars, without trauma, without the strength to save a bleeding stranger in an alley?" Seo-jin reached across the table, his tattooed hand covering Min-suk's scarred one. "Without the courage to survive 12 years of hell and still have kindness left? Without the vision to turn pain into purpose?" He shook his head. "I don't want any other Omega in Seoul. I want you, exactly as you are." Min-suk felt tears prick his eyes, but they were good tears. Healing tears. "Besides," Seo-jin added with a slight smile, "you're the only person who still scolds me when I work too late. Someone has to keep me human." "Someone has to," Min-suk agreed. They sat together in the restaurant that had been stolen and reclaimed, surrounded by the smell of fusion cuisine and new beginnings. Min-suk's scars caught the light, visible, permanent, and finally, blessedly, just part of his story rather than all of it. He'd been told no alpha would ever choose him. But the most dangerous alpha in Seoul had looked at him and seen not broken goods, but something worth keeping, worth fighting for, worth loving. And Min-suk had learned to see it too. The scars would always be there. The trauma would take years more to fully process. But he was no longer the ghost in the storage room, no longer the broken Omega who believed the lies. He was Lee Min-suk, son of dreamers, survivor of fire, owner of the Haven, mate to Kang Seo-jin. He was whole, and he was finally beautifully home.